The blood-red sun cast long shadows across Margaret's Creek, as Penelope Braxton collapsed to her knees in the dusty soil of her vegetable garden, her calloused hands trembling from exhaustion. The summer of 1878 had been merciless, baking the Wyoming Territory with relentless heat that seemed determined to wither everything it touched, including her spirits. "Mama," 7-year-old Timothy's voice carried from the porch of their modest homestead. "Are you all right?" Penelope forced herself to stand, brushing dirt from her faded gingham dress. At 32, she felt twice that age, her body aching from dawn to dusk labor. 8 months had passed since influenza had taken her husband James, leaving her alone with 3 children and a struggling farm that demanded more strength than she possessed. "I'm fine, darling," she called back, though the dizziness threatening to overtake her suggested otherwise. "Just catching my breath." She squinted toward the western horizon where the mountains stood purple against the setting sun. The fields that had once provided their livelihood now mocked her with their neglect fences sagging, irrigation ditches clogged, and cattle straying where they pleased. What James had built over a decade, she was watching crumble in less than a year. Timothy ran down the steps, his younger sisters Emma and Sarah trailing behind. Their faces, though smudged with dirt, still held traces of innocence that Penelope fought daily to protect. They didn't need to know how close they were to losing everything. "Mr. Wilson from the general store rode by," Timothy said. "He left this." The boy held out an envelope that Penelope recognized immediately as another notice of debt. She took it with a weary smile, tucking it into her pocket without opening it. There would be time enough for that after the children were asleep. "Thank you. Now let's get supper started." As they walked toward the house, Emma tugged at her skirt. "Mama, when will the cows come back?" "Mr. Parker says they're all over his land." Penelope swallowed hard. The boundary fences had been breached weeks ago, and she lacked the strength to repair them properly. "Soon, sweetheart. I'll see to them tomorrow." That night, after tucking the children into bed with stories of better days ahead, Penelope sat at the kitchen table by lamplight, unfolding the various notices that had accumulated. The figures swam before her tired eyes: mortgage payments, supply costs, livestock taxes. The bank in Cheyenne had granted her a 3-month extension after James's death, but that grace period had expired. Without substantial payments soon, they would foreclose. She buried her face in her hands, allowing herself a moment of despair she never showed her children. Tomorrow she would rise before dawn, attempt to round up the scattered cattle, repair what fencing she could, and somehow coax more yield from the parched garden. The impossibility of it all pressed down on her like a physical weight. A sudden knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. Visitors after dark were rare in this isolated stretch of territory. Cautiously, she took her husband's revolver from the drawer before approaching the door. "Who's there?" she called, her voice steadier than she felt. "Logan Quinn, madam. Sorry to disturb you so late." "I've got some cattle I believe might be yours." Penelope hesitated, then cracked open the door, keeping the gun partially hidden in the folds of her skirt. The man standing on her porch was tall and broad-shouldered, his face shadowed beneath a worn Stetson. Behind him, in the moonlight, she could make out the silhouettes of several head of cattle. "Mr. Quinn, it's past 9 o'clock, she said, suspicion edging her voice. He removed his hat, revealing features weathered by sun and wind but not unkind. At perhaps 35, his dark hair was touched with gray at the temples, and his eyes were a startling blue against his tanned skin. "Yes, madam, and I apologize for that. I was passing through from Laramie when I came across these strays near Cottonwood Creek. Noticed your brand and thought it best to return them straight away." He gestured toward the cattle. They were heading toward open range, would have been gone by morning. Penelope lowered the gun slightly. "That's very neighborly of you, Mr. Quinn. Most men would have just let them wander." "Most men might," he agreed with a slight smile. "But my father raised me better than that, especially when it comes to a widow's property." Her spine stiffened. "How do you know I'm a widow? Word travels in these parts, Mrs. Braxton. I heard about your husband last winter." It was a bad season for many. His voice held no pity, just simple acknowledgement, which she found oddly comforting. She stepped out onto the porch, looking more closely at the cattle. At least 8 head, including a young bull she'd thought long lost. Where should I put them for the night? My south pasture fence is down. Already took care of that, Logan said. Found enough intact rails to patch it temporarily. They'll hold till morning at least. Penelope stared at him, uncomprehending. You fixed my fence. Why would you do that? He settled his hat back on his head. Because it needed fixing, madam. Simple as that. Nothing had been simple since James died. Every task, every decision had been a mountain to climb, yet here was this stranger handling what would have taken her days as if it were nothing. Thank you, Mr. Quinn. I don't know what else to say. No thanks needed. I'll be on my way now, let you get some rest. He turned to go, then paused. Though if you don't mind some advice, that western section needs proper repair soon, or you'll lose more than cattle. Penelope nodded, knowing he was right but unsure how to accomplish yet another impossible task. I'm aware. It's on my list. Something in her tone must have revealed her exhaustion, for Logan studied her face more carefully in the lantern light. Mrs. Braxton, forgive my directness, but you look like you haven't slept in a month. A laugh escaped her, brittle and unexpected. Mr. Quinn, I haven't properly rested since November of last year. He nodded as if coming to a decision. I'm heading to Cheyenne but plan to make camp nearby tonight. If you're amenable, I could return tomorrow and help with those fences. I've got tools and experience. Suspicion flared again. And what would you want in return? A meal would be welcome, he said simply. Been eating my own cooking too long. Penelope hesitated. She'd learned to be wary of charity that came with hidden costs, yet something about Logan Quinn's straightforward manner disarmed her usual caution. And the reality was, she desperately needed help. All right, she said finally. I can offer you breakfast and dinner in exchange for fence work. He touched the brim of his hat. That's more than fair. I'll return at first light, Mrs. Braxton. Penelope, she found herself saying, if we're to be working together. A smile creased his weathered face. Penelope, then. Good night. As she watched him mount his horse and ride toward the creek where he'd presumably make camp, Penelope wondered if she had made a terrible mistake or received an unexpected blessing. Either way, for the first time in months, she felt something other than overwhelming dread when thinking about tomorrow. True to his word, Logan returned at dawn. Penelope was already up, having slept better than she had in weeks, preparing a breakfast of cornbread and bacon while her children still slumbered. You're punctual, Mr. Quinn, she said, opening the door to his knock. Logan, he corrected with a smile. And punctuality's one of my few virtues, according to my mother. The smell of breakfast drew the children from their beds. They emerged wide-eyed at the sight of a stranger at their table, Timothy standing protectively near his sisters until Penelope made introductions. Mr. Quinn brought back our cattle last night, she explained, and he's going to help repair our fences today. Emma, at 5, was the first to warm to him. Can you fix Dolly too? Her arm came off. Logan accepted the damaged cloth doll with grave seriousness. Let's see now. Looks like a straightforward reattachment case. I think we can save her. As he carefully sewed the doll's arm back on with surprisingly deft fingers, Penelope observed him. There was an ease to Logan Quinn that she hadn't encountered in a long time, a quiet competence that asked for no recognition. After breakfast, while the children attended to their chores, Logan assessed the property with Penelope. In daylight, the extent of the farm's deterioration was painfully evident. James had plans, she explained as they walked the perimeter. The drought last summer set us back, and then when he fell ill. Her voice trailed off. Logan nodded, respectfully allowing her space for the grief that still occasionally ambushed her. Homesteading's hard enough with 2 people. Alone, it's near impossible. Are you suggesting I can't manage? The edge in her voice surprised even her. Not at all, he replied calmly. I'm suggesting no one should have to. They reached the western fence line where several sections had completely collapsed. Logan surveyed the damage, then began unloading tools from his saddlebags. This'll take most of the day, he said. If you've got extra hands, we could use them. Penelope shook her head. I let the farm hands go in February, couldn't afford to keep them on. He absorbed this information without comment, merely nodding as he set to work. For the next several hours, Penelope worked alongside him, cutting brush, holding rails in place, and learning more about proper fence construction than James had ever taught her. By midday, they had made significant progress. When Timothy brought them water, Logan took time to show the boy how to secure cross beams properly. "My pa never showed me that," Timothy said, his small face serious as he practiced the technique. "My pa taught me when I was about your age," Logan replied. Said a man needs to know how to build things that last. Penelope watched the exchange with a mixture of gratitude and melancholy. Timothy needed male guidance, something she couldn't provide no matter how hard she tried. As the sun reached its zenith, Penelope insisted they break for the midday meal. Over cold chicken and biscuits in the shade of an elm tree, conversation flowed more easily than she had expected. "You mentioned you're heading to Cheyenne," she said. "Business or pleasure?" Logan wiped his mouth with a handkerchief. "A bit of both. I've been working cattle drives between Texas and Wyoming for years, but I'm looking to settle now. There's land for sale outside Cheyenne I'm considering." "You're a cattleman then," among other things. "I've tried my hand at most everything mining in Colorado, running freight in Arizona, even a stint as a deputy marshal in Kansas." His expression turned rueful. "Discovered I prefer cows to criminals. And family." The question slipped out before she could stop it. "None to speak of." "Parents passed on years ago. No siblings." He looked at her directly. "No wife, though not for lack of opportunity. Just never found someone worth changing my wandering ways for." Penelope felt a flush rise to her cheeks and quickly changed the subject. "How did you learn to sew so well?" "Emma hasn't put that doll down all morning," Logan chuckled. "When you spend months on the trail with no one to mend your clothes, you either learn to sew or go naked. Most cowhands can stitch a decent seam." The afternoon passed in steady work. By the time shadows lengthened across the pasture, they had repaired the entire western fence line and moved on to the south pasture. Penelope found herself working with an energy she hadn't felt in months, inspired perhaps by Logan's tireless pace. Over dinner that evening, a stew she had prepared with more care than usual, Logan entertained the children with tales of cattle drives and frontier towns. For the first time since James's death, laughter filled the kitchen. Even Penelope found herself smiling, drawn in by his storytelling. After the children were in bed, Logan surprised her by producing a small leather pouch from his pocket. "Almost forgot. Found these while fixing the fence near your north field." He poured several gold coins onto the table. "Must have been hidden in a fence post that rotted out." Penelope stared at the coins enough to cover at least 2 mortgage payments. These were in our fence," Logan nodded. "Some folks don't trust banks. Your husband might have stashed them for emergencies." It was exactly the sort of thing James would have done. Practical, secretive James, always planning for hard times. The tears came suddenly, overwhelming her. "I'm sorry," she managed, wiping her eyes. "It's just this changes everything, at least for now." Logan gathered the coins and placed them in her hand, closing her fingers over them gently. "He was looking out for you, even after he was gone." His hand lingered on hers for a moment longer than necessary, and Penelope became acutely aware of his proximity, of the quiet kitchen, of the fact that this was the first time in years a man other than her husband had touched her with such care. She withdrew her hand, confused by the feelings stirring within her. "It's late," she said, rising from the table. "You're welcome to sleep in the barn tonight rather than making camp." "Much obliged," he replied, his expression giving nothing away. "I'll be gone by midday tomorrow, still need to reach Cheyenne by week's end." Penelope nodded, ignoring the unexpected disappointment his words produced. "Of course, you've done more than enough already." That night, sleep eluded her. She found herself thinking of Logan Quinn, his kindness to her children, his respect for her pride, the way he worked alongside her as an equal. It had been so long since anyone had seen her as more than a pitiful widow or a failing farmer. Morning came too quickly. Penelope rose early to prepare a substantial breakfast, telling herself it was simply proper gratitude for his help. When Logan appeared, freshly shaved and with his hair still damp, something fluttered in her chest that she firmly suppressed. The children were devastated to learn of his imminent departure. Even Timothy, who had been initially suspicious, asked if Logan could stay another day to teach him more about fence building. "Mr. Quinn has his own business to attend to," Penelope reminded them. "We've been fortunate to have his help this long." Logan knelt to the children's level. "Tell you what, I'll show you one more thing before I go, something important every ranch needs." He led them to the barn, where he spent the next hour fashioning a simple pulley system that would allow Penelope to lift heavy items more easily. As he worked, he explained each step to Timothy, treating the boy's questions with serious consideration. "This will save your mother's back," he told them. "And when you're a bit bigger, Timothy, you can take over the heaviest chores entirely." By late morning, his horse was saddled and his belongings packed. Penelope walked with him to the edge of the property, the children having said their tearful goodbyes already. "I don't know how to thank you properly," she said. "You've done so much. Seeing this place in better shape is thanks enough," he replied. "You've got good land here, Penelope. And those children, they're a credit to you." She looked up at him, suddenly reluctant to see him leave. "Will you pass this way again, after Cheyenne, I mean?" Something flickered in his eyes, hope perhaps, or hesitation. "I could, would that be welcome?" "Yes," she answered honestly. "Very much so." He mounted his horse, looking down at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Then you'll see me again, that's a promise." With a tip of his hat, he rode away, leaving Penelope standing at the boundary of her land, watching until he disappeared over the ridge. Only then did she return to the house, to the endless tasks that awaited her, but somehow they seemed less overwhelming than before. 2 weeks passed. The fence repairs held, and with the recovered gold coins, Penelope was able to pay the most pressing debts, and even hire a local boy to help with the heavier chores 3 days a week. She found herself glancing toward the western ridge more often than she cared to admit, wondering if Logan Quinn would keep his promise. Then came the storm, a violent summer tempest that lashed the territory with hail and wind. Penelope and the children huddled in the root cellar as the house creaked and groaned above them. When they emerged at dawn, the devastation was apparent. The barn roof partially collapsed, crops flattened, and several trees uprooted. One had fallen directly across the newly repaired fence, freeing the cattle once again. For the first time since Logan's departure, Penelope felt the familiar weight of despair. She stood amid the destruction, the children silent beside her, and wondered how they would recover from this latest setback. "Mama," Sarah tugged at her skirt. "Is that Mr. Quinn?" Penelope squinted toward the ridge where a rider approached at a gallop. Her heart leapt in recognition, then just as quickly cautioned restraint. It could be anyone, but it was Logan. He dismounted before his horse had fully stopped, taking in the damage with a practiced eye. "Are you all injured?" he asked, his gaze sweeping over them with concern. Penelope shook her head. "We sheltered in the cellar, but the farm—" She gestured helplessly at the destruction. Logan's face softened. "Buildings can be fixed, land recovers. What matters is you're safe." The children swarmed him with questions and exclamations about the storm's fury. He listened patiently before turning back to Penelope. "I came back to tell you I bought the land near Cheyenne," he said. "It's good grazing country, room enough for a sizable herd. But seeing this," he gestured at the damaged homestead, "makes me think you could use another pair of hands for a while." Hope and wariness warred within her. "I can't afford to hire help right now, not with these repairs needed. I'm not looking for employment, Penelope." His voice was quiet but firm. "I'm offering friendship, maybe more in time if you're open to it." She stared at him, speechless. In all her imaginings of his return, she hadn't allowed herself to consider this possibility. "Why?" she finally managed. "You hardly know me." "I know enough," he replied simply. "I know you're stronger than you believe. I know you love those children fiercely. And I know that when I rode away from here, it felt wrong somehow, like leaving something unfinished." Penelope looked away, overwhelmed by his words and her own conflicting emotions. "I'm not looking for a replacement for James." "I wouldn't want to be that," Logan said. "But maybe I could be something different, something new." Before she could respond, Timothy ran up, out of breath. "The cattle are all over Mr. Parker's south field again. He's going to be awful mad." Logan exchanged a glance with Penelope. Seems we've got work to do before we finish this conversation, she nodded, grateful for the reprieve. We do. The next several days passed in a blur of activity. Logan established a camp near the property and threw himself into repairs with methodical efficiency. He showed Timothy how to properly mend the barn roof, recruited neighbors to help rebuild the chicken coop, and organized the recovery of the scattered cattle. Penelope worked alongside him, slowly allowing herself to depend on his strength when necessary. In the evenings, he joined them for meals but always returned to his camp afterward, respecting the boundaries she had not explicitly stated but nonetheless existed. A week after his return, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset while the children played nearby, Penelope finally found the courage to ask the question that had been troubling her. "What about your land in Cheyenne? Your plans?" Logan considered for a moment. "The land's not going anywhere." "As for plans," he looked at her directly, "they're changing. Because of us, because you feel sorry for us, not pity, Penelope." His voice was firm, admiration, connection. "When I first rode up that night with your cattle, I saw a woman working herself to exhaustion rather than giving up. That kind of strength is rare." She looked down at her hands, calloused and work-worn. "It doesn't feel like strength most days, it feels like survival. Sometimes they're the same thing." He hesitated, then continued. "My mother was widowed young like you. Raised me alone on a hardscrabble farm in Missouri. I watched her work until she collapsed, refusing help because accepting it felt like failure. Understanding dawned. That's why you fixed the fence that first night, why you stayed to help." "Partly," he admitted, "but there's more to it now. These past weeks, getting to know you, the children, it's made me question what I've been chasing all these years." Penelope felt something shift between them, a barrier dissolving, a possibility opening. "What have you been chasing, Logan?" "Something I thought I'd find over the next horizon. A place that felt like home." His gaze held hers. "But maybe home isn't a place, maybe it's people." The words hung in the twilight air between them, weighted with meaning. Penelope found herself unable to look away from him, from the quiet certainty in his eyes. "The children have grown attached to you," she said finally, deflecting from her own feelings. "And I to them," he smiled. "But it's not just them I'm growing attached to, Penelope." Before she could respond, Emma called from the yard, demanding their attention for some childish triumph. The moment passed, but something had changed, an acknowledgement of possibilities neither had been ready to voice before. As summer waned into autumn, Logan became a fixture at the Braxton farm. He never presumed, never pushed, but his steady presence transformed their lives in countless ways. Under his guidance, the property began to thrive again. The fences held, the barn stood sturdy, and with his knowledge of cattle breeding, their small herd showed promise of growth. The children blossomed in his presence. Timothy followed him everywhere, soaking up knowledge about farming and ranching with eager attention. The girls delighted in the stories he told, and the small treasures he brought them, from his occasional trips to town, ribbons for their hair, slate pencils for their lessons, candies that made their eyes widen with joy. Penelope watched it all with growing emotions she was finally allowing herself to name. Gratitude, certainly. Admiration for his patience and kindness. But also something deeper, a warmth that spread through her whenever he was near, a sense of rightness she had never expected to feel again. One crisp October evening, after the children were asleep, Logan joined her by the fire. They had fallen into a comfortable routine of these quiet conversations, sharing stories of their pasts, discussing plans for the farm's future. "I received a letter today," he said, breaking a comfortable silence. "From the land agent in Cheyenne. They're pressing for a decision about the property." Penelope's heart sank, though she kept her expression neutral. "Of course, you've delayed your plans long enough." "That's not why I mention it." He shifted to face her more directly. "Penelope, these past months have been the happiest I can remember, being here with you and the children. It's given me a purpose I didn't know I was searching for." She met his gaze, hardly daring to hope. "What are you saying, Logan?" "I'm saying I don't want to leave. Not for Cheyenne, not for anywhere." He took a deep breath. "Unless you want me to go." "I don't," she whispered, the words escaping before she could consider them. "The children would be heartbroken." A smile touched his lips. "Just the children. No, she admitted. Not just them. He reached for her hand, his touch warm and certain. I love you, Penelope Braxton. I think I started falling the moment I saw you standing in your doorway that night, exhausted but unbowed. I love your strength, your determination, your heart. Tears filled her eyes, unexpected but welcome. I never thought I would feel this way again. After James died, I believed that part of my life was over. And now, she met his gaze steadily. Now I know better. You didn't just fix my fences, Logan. You helped me rebuild my life when I thought it was beyond repair. He drew her closer, his voice low. May I kiss you, Penelope? Her answer was to close the distance between them herself. His lips were gentle against hers, the kiss tentative at first, then deepening with a certainty that made her heart race. When they finally parted, she rested her forehead against his, overwhelmed by the rightness of it. Marry me, he said simply. Let me stay, not as your helper or friend, but as your husband. Let me be a father to those children, a partner to you. Yes, she replied without hesitation. Yes to all of it. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Margaret's Creek, with the children beaming beside them and neighbors filling the pews. Logan had sold his claim in Cheyenne, using the proceeds to clear the last of the Braxton farm's debts and purchase additional cattle that would secure their future. The following spring, as new life emerged across the land, Penelope found herself sitting on the porch swing Logan had built, watching him teach Timothy to ride the new colt. Emma and Sarah were planting sunflower seeds along the garden fence, their laughter carrying on the warm breeze. Her hand rested on the gentle swell of her belly where their child grew a new beginning. None of them had anticipated when Logan Quinn had arrived with stray cattle on a summer night. Penny for your thoughts, Logan asked, climbing the steps to join her. She smiled up at him, taking the hand he offered. I was thinking about burdens and how sometimes the heaviest ones are the ones we insist on carrying alone. He sat beside her, drawing her close. And rest, have you found that too? Penelope leaned into his embrace, watching their family, for it was truly theirs, now flourish in the Wyoming sunshine. Yes, she said softly, more than rest, I've found joy. As Logan's lips found hers in a tender kiss, Penelope Braxton Quinn knew with absolute certainty that the life she had once thought broken beyond repair had instead been transformed into something more beautiful than she could have imagined, all because a wandering cowboy had stopped to fix a fence, and in doing so, had mended her heart as well.